Hey, what's up, guys? You're listening to the It Takes a Village podcast. I'm Ashley, your host. This is where the struggles are real, the callings are heavy, the kids are sticky. We come together because it takes a village, and this is your tribe. Hey, what's up, friend? Today I have Lynetta Willis, Dr. Lynetta Willis, mind you, on the episode today. She's a psychologist, and she is just really talented in helping moms get out of that stable misery, that funk, otherwise known as, this is just the way things are mindset, and helps you get out of it, figure out that, or notice that you're even in it to begin with, and then what to do with it once you realize you want more than that. So take a listen. This is really going to light your fire, to get things going, to not let your life just be stale and stagnant, because you are worth it and you deserve more than a stale bologna sandwich kind of life. Hey guys, I'm super excited to have you listening to the It Takes a Village podcast today. I have Dr. Lynetta Willis on with us, and she's a psychologist among a ton of other amazing things. I've checked out her blog, and by the end of this call, you guys are going to want to as well, because just awesome stuff that she has out there for you guys. Lynetta, thank you so much for being on. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today.
Yes, thank you for having me. This is great.
Yeah.
Excited to be in the village.
Yeah, welcome to the tribe. So today I wanted to talk to you about something that you've touched on with your audience before, and it's something that I've never talked about here on It Takes a Village, and that is just that stable misery kind of lifestyle, or really we most of the time don't even recognize that we're in it, but it's like that stagnant space that kind of just, that's, I think we always correlate it with the saying of that's just the way it is kind of lifestyle, and we don't need to be that way. So yeah. You're shaking your head no.
Nope.
Yeah. So especially right now, currently, if you guys are listening, with the current times, or, up to date, right now we're going through quarantine, a lot of us, because of coronavirus or COVID-19. And so I think this is a time where we're just noticing a lot of things because we've had a chance to slow down. We're either enjoying it or we're forced to slow down because of, jobs having to shut down and stuff like that. But either way, I think it's giving us this magnifying glass into our lives right now, and bringing up a lot of things that we probably necessarily didn't have the time or the focus to stop and be oh, wow, this is what's going on. So, Lynetta, I just want you to kind of take over and talk about, when things in our life are in this stale, miserable state, and we've noticed it, what do we do? Tell us how to navigate this space.
Yes. So stable misery, it's one of those phrases that I've used for over 20 years now, and it resonates with everybody I say it to. I don't have to define it half the time. It's stable misery. People are oh yeah, I got that. It's totally me. Wow.
Yeah.
And you described it perfectly. It's that space we get into where things are rolling along at a pretty steady, stable, familiar pace, but in certain areas of our lives, we're unhappy or we're unfulfilled.
Yeah.
Right? Now, I definitely want to differentiate it from things like depression, where if all of your life feels that way, that's a very, very different thing. But the stable misery space, it often manifests in our relationships, especially. So we might be experiencing stable misery as parents. Stable misery marriages are really common. I work with a lot of couples that experience this as well. And like you said, I think the quarantine is, or really any time where you're experiencing a lot of stress in your life, it magnifies everything. Everything gets magnified.
Yeah.
The quote unquote good, bad, or indifferent, right? We see it all. And part of the reason why that happens is I talk a lot about the window of tolerance. And that's not my phrase.
Yeah.
That is
it's a very small window.
Yes, I know. Trauma clinician Pat Ogden created the actual phrase window of tolerance, but I've sort of like grabbed it and made it my own in many ways, because you can literally picture it as a window, right? And when we're in our window of tolerance, we are resilient. We can tolerate challenges, and we might even invite challenges in, right? When we're in our window of tolerance, we're like, I'm going to do a Tai Chi class, or I'm going to do a triathlon, right? So that window of tolerance, we have energy, we have resources, both internal and external. We feel things like, we feel energetic, we feel compassionate, all of those different things. But what ends up happening, like a pandemic, for example, what can often happen is these circumstances push us outside of our window of tolerance. And we end up experiencing things like overwhelm and anxiety and sadness and low energy and all of these other things. And when we stay out there too long, what I like to call living on the ledge, when we're living on the ledge for too long, what ends up happening is we don't have the resources that we normally have when we're in the window. So we end up falling back on old patterns, old ways of thinking, old habits to run our life. And that is oftentimes where we can find ourselves stuck in that stable misery pit. Because when things are uncertain, especially like they are now, we go for what's familiar, right? Even if familiar is miserable, we go back to what's familiar. So people who are anxious might find themselves more anxious. People who are, tend to be more on the sad side might find themselves more sad. You might find yourself yelling more. You might find yourself overreacting more. All of these different things, which are normal. It's a normal reaction to an abnormal experience, like a pandemic, right? So the idea comes about, like, there are different ways that we get stuck in stable misery. If it would be helpful to kind of describe those.
Yeah, it would, definitely. Because I think a lot of us, because like you said, you mentioned it's when we're busy, and, because we do have that a lot of the times mindset of that's just the way it is, we kind of don't even notice it, I feel like. So yes, definitely give us some examples of what that looks like. That would be super helpful.
Yeah. So with parents, a lot of times, especially, it can be more insidious, right? Because we're told parenting is hard. Parenting isn't always fun. So I don't know about you all, but I can get into this space where I actually forget that that like, oh well, wait, this is supposed to be fun sometimes too, right? Like, there's joy in this that I can find. So for me, I think some of the things, well, I'll start with couples, how couples can notice if they're in stable misery. So if you're in a stable misery marriage, you might notice things like you always end up fighting, right? Like, you start out a conversation about like marshmallows, and somehow it ends up in a fight every single time. You just kind of fall into that pit, and you're like, what the heck happened? The big sign is the roommate sign. You go from soulmate to roommate, right? And you just sort of like pass by each other. You feel like you've tried all the things, all the tools, all the strategies, and you keep ending up in the same place. Your marriage feels, it's bearable, but it's just not fulfilling, right? It's just not happy. It's like, we can keep going, but you get more excitement out of binge watching like episodes of something, right? Another one is you feel more competent in like your career and with your kids than you do in your own marriage, right? And that can create an issue because you're constantly retreating to work, where you're getting that hit of adrenaline where it makes you feel good, whereas like one of my clients always says, like, I can run a Fortune 500 company, but I can't like run my marriage. So that feeling can come up. And a lot of times people, they want to work on this, right? But it's hard to find ways to do it. And as parents, like I said, it's a little bit more insidious because our kids are developing, they're going through life, and they just do things, right? Just sort of like annoying, frustrating things. And we find ourselves in the same annoying situations over and over again. But there are ways that we can get stuck in stable misery, even as parents, even when we don't feel joy. And I have it's called the Relationship Evolution Roadmap that I created. I use it personally. I use it with my clients. And listeners can access it. I can tell how to do that at the end. But there are 5 ways that we can easily fall into stable misery if we don't watch it. So the roadmap is made up. It's an acronym, PATHS, PATHS. And the first path that can lead us into stable misery is our perspective, right? So our perspective involves like the stories we tell ourselves, our vision of how this is going to go. So I don't know about you, but there are many times where I've been here. I've had a lot of clients who have been here where you just say that your child is doing this thing. Like, so I have a client, for instance, who for the longest time would say that her son was being defiant. That was it. Her son was being defiant. Like, I mean, this isn't his name, but she started like, oh, there's Defiant Danny, and it was like, right. So everything he did was viewed under that lens of defiance. And that story impacted the relationship and actually ended up pushing them into a stable misery cycle where they just weren't experiencing joy from each other.
Yeah.
And so the stories we tell ourselves can lead us to get stuck in stable misery. Another thing is our awareness. So our feelings and our body sensations, those are just signposts. They're signposts to give us information about what we're experiencing, where we need to go, that sort of thing. But what ends up happening, especially when we're really young, we learn to shut down our feelings. We learn to avoid our body, power through it, man up, woman, all this other kind of stuff. So when we get older, we're not really in touch with our feelings or with our body, and we just push through it. So when our feelings or our body gives us insight that, hey, we're not happy, there's not a lot of joy here, we miss all of those signs, right? So our lack of awareness of our feelings and our body sensations can lead us to slide into stable misery. I know that personally. Like a couple years ago, I ended up having a blood pressure. It was like, I think like 190 over 130 or something insane, like definite level.
Yeah.
Like,
and you're like, I'm okay.
I was like, I had a headache for a couple of days. Like, it was insane. But it was one of those things where, and this completely transformed this for me, because I realized I am not listening to my body. Like, when I have a body pain or my body has a need, I was seeing it almost as like a nag, like this really annoying kid that just wouldn't leave me alone. Like, oh my God, there's a headache again. What? I mean, it was one of those things where I just wasn't paying attention. And realizing now that your body sensation and your feelings, those are really, really good signposts about.
They're there for a reason.
Absolutely. And if we ignore them, that can lead us right into stable misery. The tools we use. So I always say, we're always using tools in relationships. It's never a question of, am I using a tool? The question is this tool I'm using helpful or is it unhelpful? Right? And we constantly find ourselves, we develop habits and patterns, some of us, and not always bad, quote unquote, habits or patterns, but we just develop habits and patterns about how to exist in relationships with other people. And I think what can happen is we can get into certain habits and patterns that are unhelpful with those that we care about, with our kids, let's say, where we find ourselves yelling all the time and things like that. So being stuck or being wired to use those same patterns over and over and over again, or fall into those same habits over and over again, that's another way that we can get stuck in stable misery if we don't shift, how we're showing up. And it can be tough. Don't get me wrong, because we're talking about shifting habits.
Right.
But that's one way that we can find ourselves stuck in stable misery, because we continually react over and over and over again. One thing I could say about our kids is they're pretty consistent. Like, they pretty much show up the same way all the time, like clockwork. Right. And the gift that gives us is the ability to see it coming and choose a different way, to be in those moments. And then H is healing or honoring. So another thing that can get us stuck in stable misery is our past, right? If we don't heal or allow those inner children that are carrying all the wounds out of the basement once in a while, if we don't heal them, if we don't honor them, they can pop up in other ways. They always find a way to pop up in other ways. So being able to say, okay, and this is, when I'm talking about this, I'm really talking about triggers, right? Like those things from the past that show up in our present situation. How can I heal that, right? And it may not even be things from the past. It may be about you honoring a need. You may notice I get really cranky when I get, around 6 o'clock. Maybe I need a break then. Maybe I'm tired, right? So honoring your fatigue, honoring your hunger, figuring out ways to do that. But if we ignore those things, if we ignore our past, if we ignore, our needs, that's another way that we can find ourselves sliding right back into stable misery,
Yeah.
And then the S, the last one, is self-empowerment. So a lot of times, especially as parents and in our marriages, we can find ourselves what I like to call tangled in victim vines, right? Where it's like, he did this and she did that and I can't, and all this stuff. And it's like, we get into this space of like, I'm so powerless. Like, I can't control anything. It's all out of my hands, And when we get into that space of not being able to identify where our power is, that can really, really keep us stuck in stable misery. Because where else are we going to go? I mean, I'm stuck. There's nothing else I can do. This is just the way it is. Like you said, it is what it is. And that's all that it is. It's just going to be here. Right. So, but the truth is we all have power, even if it's just over your breath. Right. And the breath is a really powerful thing. We all have some semblance of power. So being able to recognize that. But when that eludes us and we get tangled in those victim vines, that's something else that can keep us locked in stable misery.
Yeah. Oh, these are so good. And so many of these, I feel like most of us don't just fall into one category. It's like a combination of a little bit of, a few of them or all of them. And they're like, and combined, it puts you in this vicious cycle of, resentment towards your spouse. Like when you were talking about it, I could hear like, well, if, you feel that tiredness or that, like you need the break at 6, like you're about to bust, but you don't tell your husband or your partner, like I need this time for myself, then you just keep pushing through because you're like, I'm just going to do it myself. And, you assume that he can't do it or whatever the reason. And then it just creates a cycle of resentment. And, I think that is how you get in those spaces, like you said, of becoming less of a partnership and more of that roommate space of we're just going through the motions. Like, and then, you're not even, it's like a year later and you're not even connecting with each other. You're not even, all these other things. So yes. So good. Okay. So say, I'm sure the moms listening who are in these spaces are like, yes, like I can relate to so much of this. Like, but how do I even approach all these things? Cause I feel like it seems so big, or it seems so hard to, it's like one of those things that you don't even want to open because you feel like it's this can of worms. It's just going to go everywhere and things already feel hard. So how do you suggest, women go about sorting this out? Like what's their first step? How do we move forward?
Yes, absolutely. You're right. It is big. It is big because we're talking about shifting things that are stable. Right.
Right.
But it doesn't necessarily have to be like, I always tell people, my clients that I work with, don't view this so much as, oh God, I have so much work to do. View it as an experiment. Right. And experiments, by definition, you don't really pass or fail an experiment. You learn from it. You try something and then you go, oh, wow, that was interesting. Let's try this. That didn't go the way that I thought it would go. Right. So viewing it as, I think the first thing is viewing it as an opportunity as opposed to a challenge that has to be faced. Like, how can I, like Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor, one of my favorite quotes of his, he says, when we're no longer able to change a situation, we're challenged to change ourselves. And so usually when we're in stable misery, it's because the circumstances are what they are, the external circumstances are what they are. But this could be a great opportunity to be able to say, okay, I can't change what's going on. Yeah, there's a pandemic going on. I can't change that.
Right.
But what can I change? What do I have power over? What can I change? And so what I often encourage my clients to do is take like 1 week just to notice. You don't have to change it all at once. I would not suggest trying to change it all at once. Like, you don't set yourself up. Don't do that. Right. So, and pick, like I loved the way you said this, because it is so true. You said that, we could see, we could fall into different traps and be in different places. And it's so true. And the thing that got us in is also the thing that can help us get out. So when you notice that, oh, wow, I noticed that my stories, they're kind of off, they're not very helpful, or the tools that I'm using aren't very helpful. That's when you can start to make a change. So what I encourage people to do is pick one of the 5 paths, whether it be, I'm going to start listening to my stories this week. I'm going to become more aware of my body and my feelings. I'm going to start noticing the tools that I'm using when I get into these frustrating situations. I'm going to start paying attention to what I'm not honoring. Or, gosh, I sound a lot like my mom. When that happens, I'm going to pay attention to maybe some things that need to be healed, right? And I'm going to pay attention to during times when I feel like I don't have power, right? So pick one of those things, just one, to start noticing during the week. And it could be, and I would say only in one relationship, like in your marriage or with your child. Just start with one. And it might even be a particular fight that you have with your husband, let's say, like that fight that you always have all the time. Somehow it rears its ugly head. You might say, okay, next time we have that fight, I'm going to pay attention to the story I have in my head. Right. And so just notice for the first week. Pick one of those paths just to notice. And then after you do that for a week and you get really clear, because different people, that's what I was going to say, different people are more attuned to different things. Like for me, I notice my stories first. Right? That's what stands out to me. But other people might notice their body sensations or their feelings first. Right? So go with the simplest one. Don't try to get all, Avengers on this. Just go with the simplest one that you can identify the fastest, right? So if you're like, I'm kind of in tune with my body. Notice that. When do you feel tense? When do you feel, So the first week is just noticing that one thing. And then in the second week, then you can start changing. So the first week you might notice stories like, he's trying to make me mad. Or she's just being defiant, or you might start to notice your shoulders getting tense. Or you notice a surge of anger when the defiance starts to come out of your kid. Or you might notice, in terms of tools, you might notice that you're yelling, or you shut down, or you get really snarky, or you intellectualize your partner, so that you can feel superior than, over them or something. Never done that before. Or you might notice that, like I said, I sound just like my mom, or you might even notice that, wow, I feel like that 5-year-old. I feel like I'm 5 every time we have that argument, or every time my kid gets out of control. I feel like I'm 5 again, right? Or you know what? I'm noticing that every time this happens, I'm exhausted. Or I'm hungry.
I'm also wondering if there's like a lack of interaction too, because I feel like, right now we're talking about all these like big interactions, like an argument with somebody or a feeling of irritation. But I also think that sometimes possibly could it be those moments where there's like none, because you're just going through the motions and you guys aren't connecting. You aren't even having those arguments. You're barely even talking or, communicating with each other, to where maybe it's noticing that, like the lack of.
Yes. And those situations when you're in that shutdown or that autopilot situation, those situations actually can be helpful, because you have room to focus on, what am I thinking right now? Like, am I thinking, God, he's not attracted to me anymore? Or, she hates me, or this is never gonna work. We're never gonna why are we even trying anymore? Right? Yeah. So those periods, you can really pay attention to the thoughts. You can really pay attention to your body. Like, what is my body doing when we wake up in the morning and we don't say 2 words to each other? We pass by each other and don't say a word. Like, what happens in my body when that happens? Right? And just really noticing. And then the second week, you can then begin to slowly shift. So, and this is maybe where some accountability would be helpful. Get a coach, get somebody, to help through this, because the shifting part can be difficult, but this is where your stories, you start shifting them a little bit. So the mom that I brought up earlier, she, who had, what was it? Defiant Danny. Danny was not his name, by the way. I asked her, I said, when Danny is doing those things, I want you to really focus on, what do you think the purpose is? Just ask yourself, when you see him being defiant, ask, what's the purpose? And it was interesting because she came back. And so when I work with people, I use this app called Voxer, which allows them to walkie-talkie me throughout the week, which is super helpful because you're able to catch it in the moment. But even if you don't have that, like, record, like, right after it happened, because our memory of what happened is often much different than when you're actually in the situation. So I get this Vox from her, and she's like, okay, it just happened, and this is how it went down, right? And I'm like, okay. And what was beautiful about it was a couple things. One, she realized, you know what? I realized it's not always about him being defiant. Sometimes he's just being impulsive, which is really different, And I said, well, how does that change the story? How does that change your body sensation when he's being impulsive? And she said, well, when he's being impulsive and not defiant, I'm no longer thinking he's doing this just to make me mad or he's being manipulative. Now I'm thinking, oh, you can't always, like, you're not in complete control of this all the time, right? So how can I help him, right? So now she's able to lean in more. She's able to have passion, right? Just from doing that small shift. But before that, like I said, she was in this stable misery cycle with her son. So it took a little, a few more tweaks here and there of experimenting. But then we ended up finding, what did she need to be able to engage her son when he was in those moments, so that she wasn't feeling overwhelmed, she wasn't feeling shut down, she wasn't feeling powerless, and also he was getting what he needed from her in those situations. So being able to change the story. The second week is also about if body sensations and feelings were your thing that you noticed, this is a time where you start acting on them. So, I'm noticing that I'm getting really tense in this moment. And usually what I would do is I would start yelling at my husband, or I would just turn around and I'd walk away, and avoid the whole thing. Experiment, do something different. So remember, your shoulders getting tense, that's just a sign. That's just an indicator that we're going down a path, right? So maybe instead of not saying anything, just say something, right? Like, hey, I'm noticing we're in this weird space. Do you notice it? Or try, it doesn't matter what you do, just do something different than you normally do.
Anything else.
Exactly. Literally, anything else.
Yeah.
Right? And just notice what happens. And it might open up this great conversation and you all are connecting, or not, or not. But at least at least you've learned, right?
Yeah.
It's really about shifting and doing things differently. Same thing with tools, using different tools. Like if you usually yell, whisper. That actually works, by the way. Usually when we're trying to yell, if you try to whisper, you'll speak like in your normal voice. It's really fascinating how it happens.
That's hilarious.
Right? So these are just different things that people can do. Like if you notice that you feel like a 5-year-old, or you sound like your mom or your dad, when ABC, XYZ happens. Sit with that a little bit. Maybe pull out your journal and write on that and be like, what's going on here? What is it that's really coming up? What part of me needs a voice in this moment? What part of me is wounded or needs attention or has a need that's not getting met? And really just sort of sit with that. And then also for self-empowerment, the last one, asking like, where is my power in this situation? So if you notice throughout the previous week that, man, I feel powerless a lot. Like those victim vines are choking the life out of me.
Yeah.
Right? When you're in one of those tense situations, ask, where is my power? Like, what do I have control over? What can I do? Maybe it is just my breath. Maybe, if we do engage in a fight, maybe I do have the ability to walk away. If my child is jumping all over the place, pulling the dog's leg, doing all this stuff, maybe I have maybe I have the power to redirect my child to do something else. All right. But asking, okay, where is my power? And trusting it is there. It's just about locating it, finding it, and using it.
Yeah. This is so good. And I think that a lot of just all this is great. And every time you're talking about it, I'm picturing just how we feel it. I think, even if we're feeling it, maybe we feel like we're not worthy enough to change it sometimes, or that, we are in that mindset, like I keep going back to, of, this is just how it is. And for whatever reason, we feel like that's okay, or we feel like we're not worth exploring our feelings or, our sensations and doing something about it. And what was visually coming to mind was, okay, so you have this house, right? Your marriage is the house, or your relationship with your kids are the house. And so the foundation may be okay, because, they always talk about you have to have a good foundation or the house will fall. Well, the foundation can be okay, but that doesn't mean that the house isn't full of termites, to where if you don't do something about it, eventually, even though your foundational things may be okay, because maybe the termites are the stagnant, the stale, the stable misery that we're having, then eventually it is going to crumble, and you have to do something about it. And I think that's just the most important thing that I want women to take away, is not only these steps that you're giving them, but that they're worthy of doing something about it, that we're worthy of having more and enjoying our marriage again, or enjoying our kids again, or enjoying motherhood again. I think that's just
you nailed it. I mean, the antidote to stable misery is joy. That's what it is. It's joy. It's finding those places where we can be more uplifted. And usually what these paths do, the PATHS, is it helps us to deal with the things that are blocking our joy, right? Like if you notice, none of them had anything to do with making somebody else do something, right? It goes back to Viktor Frankl's quote. It's about, we're challenged to change ourselves, right? And that's where the power is, in being able to change ourselves.
Yeah.
So you're 100% right. And I have had clients who've fallen into that space of exactly what you're naming, that sense of, do I really have the right, to ask for this or expect this? And what I often encourage people to do is I say, I want you to close your eyes. Don't do this if you're driving, please.
Or let's see what happens. No, I'm just kidding. No, definitely don't close your eyes. Just shake things up right now. I feel like things have gotten, I'm like I was telling Lynetta before we did this recording, I'm in the closet recording this, so it's just weird times right now, guys. Do what you have to do to get by. I'm just saying.
Exactly. I've been there, and I was telling you, I was in my closet last week in the same situation. So I encourage you, close your eyes, and I want you to see your children's faces. And then I want you to picture them, I don't know, however old they are now, maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, and they're in their homes, and they're with their children and their partners. And now I want you to imagine that home that they're in and the relationships they have with their children and their partners mirrors exactly the one that you have with them and with your partner.
Ouch.
Yes. If that led to an ouch, there's your motivation. If you're not enough to do it for yourself right now, don't do it for yourself. Do it for them. Because children learn what they live. So the odds that they're going to replicate your stable misery marriage, pretty good.
Yeah.
Right? Pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty good. The odds that they're going to transfer your same parenting skills over to what they do with their kids, good.
Yeah.
You know? And so just realizing that if you can't do it for yourself, do it for them. Because I know everybody listening, you throw yourself off a bridge for those kids, right? In a heartbeat. So do it for them if you can't do it. That this doesn't have to be, this isn't a one shot and done. Like when I actually draw a visual of the paths framework, it's not like from one end to the other. It's not like a straight line. It's more of a spiral because you're going stable misery, just like our feelings and our body sensations. It's just, it's a sign, right? So even me and my marriage, like I literally help couples and parents break free from stable misery. That's what I do. And there are times where I see my husband and I going towards the stable misery pit. And I'm like, oh, here we go. Right? Yeah. Because it's a sign that, okay, we're not experiencing enough joy. We're getting stuck in old habits and patterns. Let's do something to shift it. Right? So it's not about like, oh, making my family stable misery free forever. No. That's not the goal.
Right.
The goal here is to recognize it and shift things so that the things that are blocking you from that joy can be moved, and then you can get more joy in. It's almost like when you're opening the blinds in the morning. You know, it's sort of like you open them and a little bit of light comes in. And then the more you turn that little knob or pull the blinds or whatever your setup is, the more fun, you know, comes in. It's that same thing. It's just one little turn lets a little bit of joy in. One little turn lets a little bit of joy in, right? Yeah. And so that's really what you're focusing on.
That's good. I didn't even think about that our goal, I mean, it's naturally going to happen where we get in those little pockets because life is busy, and I think that's okay. And I think that's another good point for the listeners is, you know, we're all facing it at some point in some degree. And maybe I think the point is that we just don't want to get in the deep pit of it. Like we don't want it to where we're constantly in it and there's more of that than there is the joy. This is so awesome. I'm so excited to be having this conversation. So, for the listeners that are hearing this and they're like, yes, like I agree, this is me, I'm relating to all this, and I'm going to take these steps. If they need further help, where can they reach out to you and utilize your resources and all those things?
Yeah. So if you want, the first step, I mean, definitely we can hop on a call. Absolutely. And you can also download the relationship evolution roadmap that I went through today. And it's at healingstablemisury.com. And I really, really encourage everyone to go grab that because it has more suggestions on there about how you can use each of these paths to really help you turn the Titanic of stable misery that you're living in right now. So please go and grab. And there are things that you can use.
Don't hit the iceberg, guys.
Don't hit the iceberg. Bad idea.
Yeah, I know.
We all know how that ends. Not good. So, yes. So go and grab that. And then you can also get in touch with me there. And you'll immediately get an email. You can respond to me. You know, I respond to all my emails directly. I don't have an assistant or anybody who does it for me. So, yeah, please reach out and realize you are not alone. Like there are so many. I think that's the other thing that keeps us stuck is this. We have like TV, which is so awesome and wonderful. And it tells us that, we should be blissful in our marriages, and our
Right.
kids should constantly bring us joy. And if it doesn't happen, it's our fault. And we're somehow broken. And if you're not having sex 5 times a day, that your marriage is really messed up. And, all this stuff. But it's
I don't know who's doing that, but
no, it ain't me. All right. So I say all that to say, you don't have to, this doesn't have to be your normal. This does not, stable misery should not be anybody's normal at all. And if it is, you are worth it. Your relationship is worth the effort to get out. Your relationship with your kids are worth absolutely the effort to turn this, because you don't want to have this pattern going on into teen years and adulthood and all of this other kind of stuff, because it will impact how you relate going forward. And if you can't do it for yourself, do it for them, because they are watching and they are learning from you. So head on over to healingstablemissouri.com, grab that. Let's get in touch. I would love to talk with you. And we'll go from there.
Yeah. I feel like I'm like, mic drop. I just dropped my pen. You couldn't see it, barely. Nobody, if you're listening, you couldn't see it, but I was just like, we're done here. I don't know what else there is to say. Yeah. No, guys, seriously, I really want you to take in the last of what Lynetta said of, being worthy, that you're not alone, and definitely reach out. I think that, being in that place and having stagnant be your normalcy is not the way, especially when you put it in the perspective of, would I want that for my daughter? Like, would I want that for my son? So then why would you accept that for yourself? So you guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Of course, if you're listening, like I said 1,000 times, reach out to her. And yeah, thank you so much, Lynetta, for being on. I had a really awesome time conversating with you.
Yes.
Yeah,
Fun.
so good.
Fun talking about stable misery. Yeah, that's.
I know. That was a really awkward thing to say, but I really enjoyed it.
Where she's like, I'm a shame researcher. I'm like, I'm a stable misery expert. Yeah.
Lynetta is awesome, you guys. If you found this episode helpful, enjoyable, it gave you some sort of knowledge nugget, make sure you share this with another mom friend. I am so glad you're a part of my tribe, and I can't wait to catch you next week for another episode of It Takes a Village podcast. Catch you later.